Let me move from those issues of form finally to issues of substance. It goes without saying that one of the keys to all applications is the infrastructure of knowledge on which they're based. Now, there are no easy ways of acquiring knowledge. There are only hard ways. There are only the good old-fashioned ways of going to libraries and reading, going to archives and reading, if these are relevant to the application you're making, of doing your homework, of knowing what it is you're applying for and to. If you're applying to a university department and a fellowship is designed specifically for that department, get to know it. It involves reading, involves work, but that kind of work repays itself. And when you acquire that knowledge, find ways of displaying it, preferably discreetly, preferably without being too showy, but demonstrate what you know. And again, this recalls the admonition of not pretending to knowledge that you don't know. Don't, as I said earlier, ever suggest that nothing has been done about, that nothing is knowable about. Always assume that there is knowledge to be had about a topic, a form of presentation, application that you're making. That knowledge, of course, has to be relevant to your field of application, but that is precisely where one takes advice. One goes to advisors, one spends time talking to people about your application in advance. One goes to the reference section in Regenstein and asks a reference librarian to help you find out relevant stuff. All of those things repay themselves directly in success rates. For those of you who are going to make grant applications particularly, I have one very important admonition in this particular respect, and that is to phrase applications in a positive and generous voice. I can't tell you how many applications, especially for graduate study or for support, grant support for graduate research, starts something like this. X has said this about this phenomenon. She or he is wrong. Y has said something else. She or he is equally wrong. Z is the third person in the debate on this topic, and she and he is not only wrong, but virtually idiotic. There is a strong tendency to write in highly negative ways, as if every bit of research one is going to do is going to rediscover the world, as if everybody who's worked on a topic or in a field before one is some kind of idiot. That is not a good strategy. Again, the chances of alienating readers is very high. I actually once encountered, I came across, I was on a panel in which there was an application like this, which was an absolutely brilliant application to study, in fact, gender in East Africa. And the applicant concerned, as I say, a wonderful project, brilliantly conceived, until the review of the literature section, in which we, the readers, were told how nobody had done anything in this field that was worth reading. The little bits that had been done were really terrible, and what followed was a diatribe against the two people who had written on the topic. Well, you've guessed it. One of the two people who had written on the topic was sitting in the room, and so an absolutely brilliant proposal went down the tubes. That person was never funded. And in fact eventually changed fields. By and large, people whose work, who've done work in fields are not idiots. So work changes its valence over time. It doesn't appear as relevant in 1995 as it did in 1975. Nonetheless, by and large, intelligent minds went into it, and good, hard effort went into it. And it's always easy to construct a project in the positive voice, to appreciate what was done before and make the argument that there is space to move in constructive new directions. And this is what I want to do. There is no bad time for a good idea. There is no bad time for building new research on old foundations. One does not have to destroy the foundations and rediscover the world every time you're going to do it. There'll be time in your lives for scholarly arguments, for debates with other scholars, and it is appropriate to do. There are times when you will want to say that writing on a topic doesn't pass critical muster. Grant applications, fellowship applications are not the time to do it, especially since your readers are anonymous. You don't know into what ether this is going to drop, and you take very high risks by writing in the negative and the destructive voice. Besides which, there is a strong tendency on the part of evaluators to assume that a generous and constructive researcher is going to do generous and constructive research. And that's going to reflect in their human sensibilities, in the quality of their cooperation with other scholars, and thereby in the product of their work. So writing in the constructive voice, in the positive voice, serves you well. It is also appropriate early in one's academic career. After all, understanding the shortcomings of other people's work is, in part, the basis of doing it better. And the best way of doing that is not to dismiss it, but to encounter it, to take it seriously, and to figure it out, to try to understand why it took the shapes that it did, and thereby to build. When you present your research in a constructive way, assume also that your proposals are going to be read alike by experts and non-experts. Again, this assumes all of my earlier admonitions: the admonition against jargon, the admonition against cutesiness, the admonition against display, the admonition against all forms of arrogance. There is no reason ever to look down, implicitly or explicitly, on a non-expert reader. Quite the opposite. I think it's one of the moral duties of scholarship to make clear why we do what we do to people who do not have the benefits of our disciplines, our scholarly training, or whatever. And indeed, inasmuch as research is an obligation, after all, what you're applying for are public funds, funds that are being spent in a spirit of generosity on your work. Under those conditions, you have to think very clearly about what the moral requisites of making your work available to other people is all about. And certainly the notion, the highly elitist notion, that non-experts don't count doesn't bear moral scrutiny, especially when one is being funded by other people to do what one is doing. It seems to me that the obligation to be comprehensible to others, and especially, of course, in this case, to people who may be evaluating your work as non-experts, becomes especially acute.